Hi everyone, and welcome to a special edition of My Inspiration, a podcast series from HMV. We've got something a little bit different for you today, an extended chat with the Pet Shop Boys. To celebrate the release of their new album Hotspot, Neil Tennant and Chris Lowe have curated an in-store display for HMV, which shows off their favourite albums, films and books. You can find details of this on our website, hmv.com. We spoke to the pair about the albums they chose, which include selections from Kraftwerk, David Bowie and Dusty Springfield, and today you can hear that chat in full. We also chatted to them about the making of Hotspot, their work with producer Stuart Price, and their grand plans for a Greatest Hits tour. Our regular format will be back next week, but here, as a palate cleanser and a bit of a tee-up for our new series, please enjoy the Pet Shop Boys. Well, we're delighted to be joined by Pet Shop Boys. Thank you for making the time. How is everything okay?
Very good, yes. We're in the middle of a promotional schedule for our new album Hotspot and doing interviews and stuff. Mm-hmm. And, of course, we've got our promotion with the HMV shops where we've chosen records, music and books. And I think we're going to talk about some of those, aren't we?
Indeed. But we thought we'd start with a little bit about the new record, which is Hotspot. And it's the end of it's been billed certainly as the end of a trilogy. Now, did you know at the beginning of the trilogy that it was going to be a trilogy, or has that sort of evolved as things have gone on?
No, the trilogy, we decided to make an album with Stuart Price a few years ago, I think in 2012, called Electric, where we decided to go back to making a purely electronic dance album, because we had a load of songs we'd written that hadn't gone on the previous album, and we had some new ones. And in an interview, I, off the top of my head, said it was going to be the start of a trilogy. I don't know. I needed something to say.
That's one way of locking Stuart Price into it, isn't it?
Yes. And it has turned out to be a trilogy. So there's been Electric, Super, and now Hotspot.
Could, of course, be another one.
Yeah, and then we turn out to be
Quadrilogy.
What's the word for that? A quartet.
Quartet. Quadrilogy,
yes.
whichever you prefer.
Yeah.
String quartet. Maybe we should do it on strings. When we call it a string quartet.
So, obviously it's Stuart for the third album in succession. I mean, a lot of artists at kind of the stage you are in a career, you know, they're dispensing on producers entirely, but obviously that's a relationship you've really come to value. What is it he kind of gives you?
Well, firstly, we always like to work with the producer. I think there's only one album we've done that was self-produced, because it's always good to have someone else's take on what you're doing, someone else's imagination applied to what you're doing. I think we always think you could go a bit further with it. So we pretty much always work with producers like Stephen Hague and Trevor Horn, and recently Stuart. And I think what Stuart brings to it is he's a brilliant programmer. He loves electronic music, and he works very fast, so you don't get bored. And he's a lot of fun to be with. But with this album, which is different from the last two sounded very digital, but this album, Chris and I wrote most of the songs in Berlin, and we suggested that we actually worked in Hansa Studios in Berlin, and Stuart came over from LA, so that was, and in Hansa Studios, which is famous, for David Bowie recording Heroes there, and U2 recorded there in Depeche Mode, and lots of German electronic groups, as well as German Schlager singers as well. They have a lot of old gear, and so rather than have just the shiny latest equipment, we had equipment going back to the mid-70s, and so the album's got a slightly more analogue sound than the previous two. It sort of sounds, it's got a sort of Berlin quality about it somehow.
Berlin's somewhere that obviously you've live on and off for a while. I mean, it's a place that obviously means a lot to you. Is recording there, I mean, is it easy and joyful? I mean, are you able to work? You don't, one of these bands have to take to the countryside for a month at a time to get stuff done?
It's a good place to write, because I don't know, you just get, I don't know really, you don't get bothered as much. Although emails do come through just as much there as they do here, but somehow you seem a bit more remote from everything. And it's like you just got your own little room, and there's less distraction, although we do tend to spend a lot of time having cups of coffee and cups of tea and cafe and cooking and all that kind of stuff. But it's a far more relaxed environment than London. London's very hectic compared to Berlin. And also, you hear a lot of music when you're in Berlin. Like all the bars always seem to have a DJ playing from the laptop, so you sort of hear lots of interesting music. And just even driving around Berlin in a taxi at night, the radio stations seem to play some obscure music that you've not heard before. And so it's a good place to be. And we've got quite a few friends there, so socially it's good. And that, the clubs are good. It's famously Berghain, all that kind of stuff. And so
level above London clubbing.
Sorry,
a level above London clubbing.
Well, no, it's just different. Actually, what's good about it is that a lot of the clubs, you're not allowed to take photographs in there, and they don't have cameras everywhere, so people can let themselves go a bit. In London, I think you're always looking around to make sure that you're not making a fool of yourself. So you're not really free in London. Actually, that's the main thing. Berlin, you feel a lot more free.
And you've got Ollie Alexander from Years and Years on this record. I mean, how did that collaboration come about? Was that something that you wanted to do, or he wanted to do, or a meeting at a festival?
Well, it came about from our manager, who was having a meeting with Polydor Records about something else. And they were talking about Years and Years, and out of that conversation, Polydor said, why didn't Neil and Chris write with Years and Years? Which meant that Ollie Alexander came around to our studio. The idea was there was a track for their album originally. And then the musical style was so different from what they do. We suggested putting it on our album, and then Ollie came in and sang it again. But he's a lovely guy, and he just came to the studio, and he'd been to Dreamland in Margate the day before. I'd never heard of Dreamland in Margate. I said, wow, it sounds like a song title. and Chris had already had a backing track lying around that we based it on. But Ollie's got a beautiful voice, and he sings in a different sort of vocal style than I do, and his sort of melodic ideas are different. So it worked very well together.
And you're about to head out. You've got a big tour booked for May, June, all across Europe.
Yes.
And 14 records deep. How on earth do you pick what goes in the live set now?
Well, the tour is called Dreamworld: The Greatest Hits Live. So that in fact chooses itself, really. They're all singles. It's meant to be all the biggest hits. There might be one or two which we think should be hits.
So now we'll move on to talk about the records you've chosen. I thought I'd start asking by what didn't make it, because picking 10 albums when you're been making music for a long time, there must be some albums that come close but don't quite make the cut.
Well, it's only 5 each.
Yeah,
you've chosen 5 each. So coming up with 5 in a way is quite difficult. Why would you? I mean, I've listened to thousands of albums. Why would you pick out 5 in particular? So I can't really say, such and such. Actually, I've got nothing by the Beatles in, for instance. But those albums are so familiar, I almost don't even need to hear them. One of the things I quite like about these reissues the Beatles have done recently is you get studio versions, others different takes of songs, so the familiar becomes slightly unfamiliar again, which is quite interesting. But yeah, some records I sort of don't necessarily need to hear again unless there's some surprising context for them. Actually, I can't remember what records I've chosen.
Well, that's a bit of voyage of discovery.
Well, I did it before Christmas.
Oh,
yes. Yeah.
Well, the other thing is, obviously, there are a fair few best-ofs in here.
Well, I'm a bit like that because I prefer singles anyway. I'm not really an albums person. So
never have been, or has that sort of evolved over time?
Well, apart from David Bowie, you wouldn't want his greatest hits because a lot of his best stuff is album tracks.
Yeah, it's true. I think pop music, pure pop music, generally speaking, you probably want the greatest hits. You probably want ABBA's greatest hits.
We're doing a greatest hits tour.
Yeah, some people you might want The Visitors then by ABBA, but then some artists, as Chris says, like David Bowie, if you just listen to the greatest hits,
yeah, you'd be missing a lot.
You miss a lot of. I mean, I've always liked side 2 of Heroes, for instance.
Well, fittingly, that's where the list starts with Hunky Dory, which is the one you've picked.
That's you, I think.
I think I chose that.
Yeah.
So, I mean, Bowie. Everyone has a favourite record, everyone has a favourite different period. So why is this the one that you decided to go for?
Well, it's got loads of great songs on it, this one, hasn't it?
Yeah, it starts with Changes.
Yeah, also it's got a great sleeve. Actually, in those days, you used to spend a lot of time listening to the record and looking at the sleeve.
You still can do that. If you buy a Hotspot, by the way, it's got a gatefold sleeve with photographs taken by us.
Yeah, I don't know how long you'd want to look at that. Whereas David Bowie in a dress,
Yeah.
It's quite interesting. And then didn't it have scrawly writing as well?
Yeah.
Also, I don't know, but was it his handwriting?
I think it was, yeah. In one, like, the song Life on Mars, it says, thanks to Frankie for inspiration, something like that. And it means he's borrowed the chord change from My Way by Frank Sinatra.
Yeah. And it was just one of the first David Bowie albums that I got into. Funny enough, Life on Mars is on it as well, isn't it? I bought Life on Mars as a single, but I never thought of checking out where it had come from or anything more about him. So I didn't really get into David Bowie until I was at university, way after the event. But also then David Bowie was sort of part of the whole... I started going to New Romantic nights, which were sort of called Bowie Roxy. What were they called?
Bowie Roxy nights.
Bowie Roxy nights. And actually, first time I went to one of those in Liverpool, I thought it was a fancy jazz party going on. Well, I'll follow them. And it turned out to be sort of a whole new romantic thing that was happening. So David Bowie was very much a part of my university time, and also the beginning of the new romantic scene, which was just happening in the 70s.
I mean, this is obviously pre-Ziggy Stardust and all the flamboyance that would come later. But I mean, is this the Bowie would say you like the best, or is it just a little bit?
No, I like Bowie all the way through. I liked it right through to his last album.
Amazing about Bowie in that period is, you said that about Hunky Dory. Hunky Dory came out, I think, in late 1971. Ziggy Stardust comes out in June 72. Aladdin Sane's early the next year, followed by Pin-Ups the same year.
Yeah, how did he do it? He obviously
and he was touring.
He obviously didn't do any promotion.
He did a lot of promotion, actually. I remember when Ziggy Stardust came out in early 72. My brother and I were obsessed by him because he was on the Old Grey Whistle Test, singing. I think a song from the Hang On To Yourself, and 5 Years, the first track from Ziggy Stardust, and we became completely obsessed by him. And we used to go to the record shop in Newcastle. I think this is before there was an HMV shop in Newcastle. And in those days they had stereo booths where you could listen to mainly classical records because they were stereo. And we used to say, can we listen to Hunky Dory David Bowie in the stereo booth, please? And used to go, put it on, and it'd go in. And those opening chords of changes still remind me of being at Windows Records in Newcastle and hearing the start. And it was so atmospheric and brilliant.
And the next, we have our first greatest hits, which is Randy Crawford.
That's me again.
Yeah.
Have you not got any Neil's?
No, we're not going
we're not believing you. We're not interested in what you listen to, Neil.
Because you're a former rock critic, I think. Yes.
Well, it's another greatest hits. I've not really ever had an album by Randy Crawford. I've only ever had the greatest hits, so I don't know what the rest of the catalogue's actually like. But if you're feeling slightly down or anything, Randy Crawford is one of the artists that I'll run a bath with nice oils, light a candle, and then literally drown my sorrows and possibly myself listening to.
It's 18 tracks long. It's a long bath, that.
Oh, I wouldn't have got that far.
Yeah, but it's got one of the greatest records ever made. One Day I'll Fly Away.
Yeah.
Which is such an amazing song.
Yeah. Rainy Night in Georgia. I love her voice. I really like her voice. I don't know what she's doing now. I mean,
it's got takes on Dylan and takes on Imagine, John Lennon on there as well.
Oh, I don't like it when they do that.
Oh.
No.
I have a theory that Imagine's it's not really a song, it's a record. It's the sound of the piano, and the great drum sound, and the strings, and the production, and his voice, of course. And when someone else does it, a real singer comes in and does it, it always seems to me to kill the song, because the song's quite fragile, really. And it's a lot of it's to do with what John Lennon thinks and how John Lennon's voice sounds, that strange effect he has. And when you take that away, I don't think it's that robust a song, really. Anyway, why are we talking about that? Yeah.
Did you say she covered it?
Yeah,
she's on.
It's on the very best of Randy Crawford.
Right.
Yeah. Would Kraftwerk be the first one to use?
Yes.
Okay, we'll talk
What should I
Kraftwerk.
choose? Computer Love?
Computer, yes, indeed. And it's the 8th Kraftwerk record, so it's later in the period.
Well, Kraftwerk started off as very avant-garde, and then they developed into being electronic purists. And in those days, in the early 70s, and actually going into the 80s, electronic music was very difficult to make. If you look at, an ARP synthesizer. There were huge things with wires that you plugged in, and in some ways, electronic music was created by what the synthesizers did. So they would play dunk 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 rhythms. The first synthesizer I had when we first met, a Korg MS-10, it only played one note at a time, but you could get it to play, arpeggios or dunk 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 dunk, and that's why so much electronic music is like that. And it's very exciting because it's actually created by the machine itself. And then, but something Kraftwerk were also amazing at is writing beautiful melodies, and also summing up parts of, maybe even mundane parts of life in a kind of dreamy, computerized way. And this is their most romantic album, Computer Love, but it's a very alienated romantic album. And the actual song, it's called Computer World, actually, the album, but the actual song Computer Love is one of my favourite sort of love songs ever been written. And I think it's about a guy, falling in love with the computer as much as anything else. I was with Kraftwerk, you're very right, they're German, because sometimes they've got lines in, you kind of feel almost Mozart could have written or something. But it's a great, and of course it's a sort of concept album. It's called Computer World. It's about how the world, this is being written at the time when the world is becoming completely computerized. And Kraftwerk are also great at doing lists like Deutsche Bank and Scotland Yard. And actually we sort of nicked that lists idea for some of our songs as well later on. But it's a very beautiful and wistful album at the same time. And also it still sounds modern. It's actually 40 years old now, or nearly 40 years old, and it still sounds really, really modern.
You talk about the technicality of it and being kind of limited by the gear you've got. That must be the case with your own career in terms of, now the range of stuff you can have and the range of sounds you can have instantly must dwarf everything.
I've always assumed it's why Kraftwerk don't make new music anymore, because the limiting of choices in early electronic music made it very sort of pure. But nowadays, then when sampling came in, Kraftwerk did make an album with samples. Tour de France, that song has got samples of bicycle wheels going around stuff. And but there's such a choice nowadays. It's difficult to have that strict rationale that Kraftwerk had, and they were very lucky to have, because that created the sound of their music. Whereas when you've got an indescribably vast choice and it's quite easy, it makes it more difficult. I think that's why in our last 3 albums we've gone back to just purely electronic sounds in the main, because it's good to restrict your choice and you get a sort of stronger sound out of it.
You think that's why you find musicians who are saying, well, we're only going to record using analog equipment, or we're only going to use being cut to tape, because limitations are as creatively freeing as arriving with all this.
When we used to work on 4-track, sort of weird 4-track recording system, early 80s. But what you used to do then was spend a lot of time bouncing tracks on each other. So you have to get the drum and the bass, and then you bounce them onto one track.
Well, the first West End Girls we did in New York was all done on one keyboard, just on the emulator, with all the sounds were on floppy disks, and we just went through taking sounds. So that was very restricting, and very quick. But then, of course, we remade it, and that took
a week.
But the original was took minutes, really.
Oh yeah, an hour. Yeah.
Next one, we'll keep going with your choices, I think. Marvin Gaye, What's Going On? Timeless.
Marvin Gaye, What's Going On is timeless. Actually, we were bickering about why it doesn't have a question mark, because I wrote down the list with a question mark. And that's how pedantic we both are, by the way. Chris immediately emailed me to say it doesn't have a question mark. So he's meaning, I've always interpreted it as a question, what's going on? Whereas actually, without the question mark, it's saying, this is what is happening now, what's going on. And this is written and recorded by Marvin Gaye at a turbulent time in America's history during the protests, the Vietnam War, civil rights, etc., right after the hippie period started. Black Power was starting. And there'd been race riots, for instance, in Detroit. And so Marvin Gaye is sort of looking at what's happening in the black community and also what's happening to young people in America. And yet it's such an amazingly beautiful and romantic soul album. Every song is beautiful. They've all got a real heart and soul to them. And also Marvin Gaye's this amazing thing of singing these very loose backing vocals behind his own lead vocal. That we've actually quite often tried to copy in a very white English way, but it's an album I've never got. So I didn't actually hear this album actually. I don't think till the early 80s. In 1971, when I think this came out, I wouldn't have been able to afford to buy an album. Really, I didn't have any money, and but once you heard it, you know, it's always stuck with me, and I always own a copy of it somewhere or other, and it's been reissued, remastered, and what have you. And he's an amazing arranger as well. He's one of the great geniuses of all time pop music, and of course the classic thing is the record company hated it, and it was a huge hit. And that so often happens with in the world of the record company.
Back to the Odyssey through the best ofs, and we'll move on to the Bee Gees.
Chris's best of the best ofs. This could be a separate HMV area of the shop. Chris Lowe's best of the best ofs.
I did choose an album by somebody, but you didn't have it.
Oh.
Yes, you didn't. Nina Simone,
Simone's Baltimore, which actually is one of my favourite albums all the way through, and I often listen to that all the way through, but it's no longer in print apparently. Oh. So I don't know why that is. Anyway, so back to the best ofs. Which one is this?
Bee Gees.
The Bee Gees, very underrated band. I mean, it's basically two bands because you've got two completely different eras. You've got I don't know if it's in two CDs, but yes, it should be. Yeah. You've got the first CD, which is sort of a Beatlesque sort of band with psychedelic in places, but it's got some fantastic songs. And then you've got the disco era, so you get two for the price of one, really, with this. I absolutely love disco music. I think Saturday Night Fever is a fantastic film. It must have been so exciting being the Bee Gees then, and every record. Did they have the top 5 singles in the American
That was in the
Billboard?
70s they might have done that, yeah.
Yeah, it must have been really exciting being the Bee Gees then. And for me, it was when I started going clubbing in Blackpool to Man Fridays, and we had the lighting up dance floor, and there was a John Travolta look-alike on the dance floor in a white suit, and we all used to do the dance. And it was absolutely brilliant.
I think, though, in the whole thing of people talking about the white suits and everything, the Bee Gees almost became a sort of cliche, and they were parodied on British television and stuff, weren't they? But actually the records and the songs are absolutely compellingly brilliant and have got an amazing feel and vibe about them. Staying Alive is a really astonishing song, and the harmonies on How Deep Is Your Love, I mean, they're really, really brilliant records.
Then you've got all the songs that they wrote for other people. Dionne Warwick, I love that song, and
Barbra Streisand.
You don't like that one. You have to choose one I didn't like.
Yeah, I can't think of anyone else, actually, that's why.
What?
I can't think of it.
Actually, I've never liked Barbra Streisand's voice.
Well,
just don't like it. Doesn't do anything for me. It leaves me cold.
I think it's it's a cold and controlled voice, but technically brilliant.
Yeah. Is she technically brilliant? You said I'd never have thought of that.
Yeah.
That anyone could be technically brilliant. But if they don't communicate an emotion, what's the point?
I mean, arriving at the Bee Gees is the way I was introduced to them. It's kind of already come out the other side, and everything sort of, they were parodied a lot, as you say, and it looked a little bit naff. But it was hugely phenomenally successful, and also appreciating the primitive equipment they must have used. It must have been so time-consuming to get all those harmonies to the standard that.
Well, the three brothers, and I think that's how they came up singing in harmony.
Yeah, they were all a harmony group when they were children. But what you say about primitive, well, the 1970 stuff is all recorded with producer Arif Mardin using top studios in New York, Miami, and LA probably. So I think that was a great year for making albums. A few years ago, Daft Punk made that album where they wanted to go back and make a quality 70s style album. And I think when you had we always wanted Arif Mardin to produce us because of the Bee Gees, really, actually. And but funny enough, the Bee Gees wanted us to produce them.
Oh, really?
We met them at the 1988 Brits Awards, and I was saying, "Oh, Reef Martin is brilliant," and Barry Gibb said, didn't really agree with that actually, and he said, "No, you guys should produce us." And we
That'd
were
be far too intimidating.
We were absolutely
couldn't do that.
terrified.
Because they've just had a hit with You Win Again, which is also a fantastic record.
Yeah, they're next to the 80s. Bee Gees and the Synclavier.
Yeah. Very underrated songwriters, the Bee Gees, I think.
Better than the Beatles, according to what you've
Some people
provided.
might say better than the Beatles, and I'd be one of them.
Probably one of them.
Well, I never listened to the Beatles, but I do listen to the Bee Gees.
So moving from somebody you were too intimidated to produce to someone who you weren't too intimidated to work with, we've got Dusty in Memphis next.
Dusty in Memphis was a record I probably heard the very late 70s, 1979. There was a period where you could buy Dusty in Memphis had been reissued and then sort of remaindered, so you could buy it for 99 pence. And 99 pence even in 1979 wasn't that much money. And I bought it in a remainder record shop somewhere, and I just couldn't. Actually, funny enough, the most famous track is Southern Preacher Man, which is obviously a very good record, but actually it's not my favourite track. And of course we were able to talk to Dusty Springfield about this afterwards, and she was very intimidated because Dusty was always a huge supporter of soul music and dance music, and she got her sort of dream at the gig at the time to go to Memphis and record where Aretha Franklin, for instance, had recorded in the same studio with the same producer. And when she got there, she was terrified because of simply the history of who else had stood behind the microphone. So she got laryngitis, and then she ended up going. Jerry Wexler, who's produced the album, she gave him a nervous breakdown, and then she ended up doing the vocals in New York. So in fact, Dusty in Memphis is really Dusty in New York, but the band is in Memphis, I think. And the choice of songs is really amazing. I guess all the songs, most of the songs anyway, came from that Memphis scene. And she had people like Randy Newman, which is my favourite song on the album, a song called I Don't Want to Hear It, and just about a young girl whose lover is obviously being unfaithful, and the whole neighbourhood's talking about it. And the way the backing vocals are on that song is just really, really incredible. The whole album I've listened to, hundreds of times. I never ever get sick of it. And Dusty, when we recorded with Dusty, we did a song called In Private. And Dusty said, "Well, you like the backing vocals on Dusty in Memphis? Why don't we have a answering backing vocal, like on I Don't Want to Hear It Anymore?" And we did do that. So it was quite exciting, really, to work with the same singer. It seems sort of incredible now, such a sort of historical period of a long time ago, that we were in the studio with Dusty.
What was it like? I mean, was it intimidating?
No, she was very nice. I think she was intimidated first, but Dusty really loved technology, and she once famously said to us, "I wish I was a machine," and because she had no time for people who thought there was a sort of an authentic way of singing soul. Dusty wanted everything to go through everything. She wanted every possible effect. In the 60s, she used to record her vocals in the toilet at the studio because she liked the bright effect it gave it. And she was a great one for experimenting. She was very interesting, and she recorded vocals very slowly, word by word sometimes, but you learned such a lot listening to. I never really thought about singing till we worked with Dusty. Then you saw how she bent the melody and made every verse different. It was quite an experience, really.
But the record, Memphis, was a commercial failure at the time, wasn't it? It was written off very quickly, and it's only people came to it probably as you did in later years.
Yeah, no, it's had a real life, this, and then it got into Rolling Stone's best 100 albums of all time and what have you. And I'm pleased to say it's still available in the HMV shop.
As we go back to
the best of the
best of the best ofs, a New Order's Substance.
Another greatest hits. Yeah, well, we're lucky to know New Order. which is nice. They are really great people and a lot of fun to know, and actually very funny. I particularly like the era of when they're just making really great electronic dance music. We seem to have quite a lot of the same influences from the same period when we were listening to Bobby O and all that kind of music coming from New York, and they were obviously hanging out in the same sort of clubs and listening to the same music. And one night we ended up back at Johnny Marr's house actually, but it turned out that me and Bernard, well actually all of us and Bernard got the same, basically the same record collection from the time, and they made a video I think where they were going into the Funhouse. Was it the
Confusion?
Going for Confusion. I thought, oh God, we used to like going there as well.
No, in the taxi in New York.
Yeah, and anyway, but all of those influences of electronic dance music and high energy from that period, a lot of the best tracks on Substance are on there. Yeah, they'd really found their form, I thought, there, and very uplifting. And of course, Blue Monday is just, even now, is a floor filler. You could play that at any club, I think, anywhere, and it would still fill the floor.
Very concise 12-track collection. I mean, I think because of the way it's packaged, lots of people think it is an album. Obviously, it isn't.
Yes, no, 'cause it's got a good title, isn't it?
Yeah.
At the time, our designer, who still designs our records, Mark Farrow, knew Bernard a bit because he comes from Manchester and he'd worked at Factory Records actually. And he said, "Oh, New Order, we like your album, our first album, please." And actually, New Order went on and worked with that producer, Stephen Hague. And we swapped albums. When it actually came out in 1987, they had Substance coming out. And we gave them copies of our album, they gave us copies of ours. And that was kind of the beginning to know them.
So after New Order, we move on to Miles Davis.
Miles Davis, I'm not very good at saying it in French, it means ascent to the scaffold. What is it in French?
Ascenseur pour d'Estrefort.
There you go.
No, what?
Ascent to the scaffold. It's from a French film by Louis Malle, famous French director, in, I think, the very early 60s or very late. I think it's about 1961. The opening theme of this album, Miles Davis Trumpet, is just, for me, the best sequence of notes in jazz music there is. And it's so amazingly cool and slightly scary, and it's sort of like an alarm that something's going to happen. And I seem to remember, obviously, for years, the film takes place on sort of death row, and
I read the description this morning. It all sounded very grim.
it's a brilliant film, but the soundtrack is, and I listened to it the other night actually. I never get sick of listening to it. And it's Miles Davis at the height of his powers. Miles Davis is very sensitive and then very hard at the same time, and it's all instrumental music, but really the main theme is so sort of blue and dark, and I don't really like the word cool, but it is cool. It's difficult to talk about, but I highly recommend you buy it from the HMV shop.
We when we got the list, I thought there might be a few more soundtracks, but there's just the one. Are they something you?
It's not its soundtrackness that I like about this. Really, I would like it if it wasn't a soundtrack, but of course it is a soundtrack. I do like film soundtracks. I used to listen to John Barry's film soundtracks in the early 80s. Actually, one regret I have is that John Barry wanted to write with us, and we were busy doing something else, so we didn't do it. And I always think it would be interesting to do, because he was an amazing writer, particularly of when he did a lot of James Bond stuff.
I know a good soundtrack I like. Once Upon a Time in America.
I was about to say, and then there's Ennio Morricone.
That's got that heartbreaking melody where the boys bought the girl some chocolates or a cake or something. Anyway, and he's going to take it to this girl who he likes, and then he just sits on the stairs and ends up eating all the cake himself.
I've never seen it. I know. I've never seen it.
Anyway, Ennio Morricone is really
I've got,
gorgeous.
I think,
piece
2
of music.
DVDs of it. And I've still keep it. It's very long, though, isn't it?
Oh, you don't like long?
No,
some films are good long.
No, they are good. No,
Most films are good short, but this one's good long.
No, I need to watch that because I used to have the soundtrack album of the film, having never. But actually, I only saw Sent the Scaffold relatively a long time after I heard the record. The first time I heard the record, though, I had a girlfriend in those days, and we went on a holiday to Paris, and we were staying in this little flat we'd rented, and I keep saying remaindered because that's what they say in books, but when records being printed and they're selling it cheap. I bought Sent to the Scaffold, and it always reminds me of this holiday in Paris in 1979, where, as ever in Paris, it rained most of the time, and we had a great time. It always reminds me of that as well.
So we finished the best of the best of.
Another one.
Barry White.
Barry White. Go on. Well, he's fantastic, isn't he? I've never got to see him live, though, which is a shame, because I've seen him performing live on television, and he was quite a performer. But what a great voice, fantastic songs. Of course, he started off as an arranger, so the arrangements of the songs are incredible. But he was a sort of sound of the 70s, wasn't he?
Yeah. For me, I lived in a flat in Tottenham in the mid-70s. One of the flatmates went to the London College of Fashion. And to me, this is the sound of the London College of Fashion having a party in 1975. And girls saying, "Oh, I'm going to wear a zhushy frock." And they all loved it. It was so fashion, because it's a great runway
We got use
song.
of a sample to put on one of our songs.
From him?
From him, he actually let us use...
Positive role model?
You know, the what song is it? What song is it? What's that song?
You're my first man, last mate.
Yeah, so he actually gave us the use of that sample. So I was wondering if we could use that sample that he's given us permission for, or put it on something else.
Well, you'd have to make a medley of the Positive Role Model, maybe.
Yeah, well, we could endlessly remake Positive Role Model just using that riff.
Positive Role Model, 2020 version.
Yeah,
It's only got the Barry White bit there.
yeah, that's the only bit you want, really.
Yeah, quite.
And for you, finally, we have the Pearl, which is Harold Budd and Brian Eno.
Well, I'd always like ambient music. And one reason I got into ambient music was because of this record. A friend of mine, who's a writer, John Savage, when he was a rock journalist, because the great thing about being a rock journalist in the early days was you got free records. When I was working for Smash Hits, free records, so you hear things you would normally hear. And he'd just been sent as an album by Harold Budd, who's a pianist and makes electronic music as well, and for 3 pianos, and I love that record. And I started to go through his back catalogue, and this is his sort of classic. It's one of the great classics of ambient music. And Harold Budd has this very sort of echoey, minimalist style, and of course that fits in with Brian Eno. They made a couple of albums together, but this is the one, and it's an album again I've played. If we're on tour and I come back from the gig and I might have a bath because you're all sweaty, and famously I might drink a glass of red wine in the bath to chill down, or to come down after the gig, I'll often play The Pearl by Harold Budd and Brian Eno, and I've been playing it now for 25 years probably.
I thought I might ask this question, and I wonder if we'll be able to do it, but we'll give it a go. Which is the Desert Island Discs. If you could only keep one of these each, which one would you keep?
God.
What are my 5 again? Brian Eno, Harold Budd,
Miles. Dusty in Memphis, Marvin Gaye, and Kraftwerk.
Good choice, by the way. Amazingly, for someone who's such a pop person, I would take the Miles Davis record. It'd be great on the desert island as the sun's going down over the whatever sea it is. Bow, 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 bow. That drum sound would be amazing. Yeah.
I'd probably go for the Sound of Music soundtrack.
But
Which isn't chosen there.
But you've chosen the DVD.
But it's chosen as a DVD,
Oh.
so I'm sort of cheating slightly.
And why would you choose that?
Because I love it.
Great Chris is a big fan of The Sound of Music.
I love show tunes and musicals.
He hates them.
I was glad that they showed it again over Christmas, because it's not been on for the past few Christmases, and it's one of the things I really look forward to, is watching The Sound of Music again.
It's very long, The Sound of Music.
Oh, it's great that it's so long. In Germany, it used to stop at the wedding for unknown reasons.
All that Nazi business.
Actually, I don't know if that's true, but it's great.
We were told it was true.
I can't believe that's true, but there you go.
Well, they've probably got. I'm sure now they have the full length version.
Yeah.
I like Mary Poppins. I watched it on a plane recently, or 2 or 3 years ago, and I realised that Mary Poppins started psychedelia. Comes out in 1964. No psychedelia then. You know, when they go into the cartoon world, it's an acid trip. There's no question about it. There's no question about it. The whole thing's an acid trip. In fact, I think the film should be banned. I think it persuaded a whole generation to take acid.
Well, we'll leave it there. Thank you very much for letting us hear your choices, and best of luck with the tour and with all of Hotspot.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
So that was our chat with Neil and Chris, which we hope you enjoyed. If you need a reminder of the albums they were talking about, Chris chose David Bowie's Hunky Dory, The Very Best of Randy Crawford, Barry White's The Collection, New Order's Substance, and Bee Gees' The Record. Neil picked out Kraftwerk's Computer World, Marvin Gaye's What's Going On, Dusty Springfield's Dusty in Memphis, Miles Davis's Lift to the Scaffold, and Harold Budd and Brian Eno's The Pearl. Details of all the albums, as well as a selection of films and books the pair have chosen, can be found on our website. My Inspiration will be back next week for the start of our 3rd season. We kick things off with LaRue, who will be talking about disco icon Nile Rodgers. To get that and all the other episodes of My Inspiration, make sure you subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts from.